those that have flow and are able to master it and practice it, they have a deep sense of purpose and meaning. Hey everybody, Dr. Dan here, and I guide students to be smart about higher education and live a life that matters. Today's wisdom for the week is titled 8 Ways to Know You're in Flow. A journey into a wondrous land of imagination that is a dimension not only of sight and sound, but of mind. There is a fifth dimension as vast as space and as timeless as infinity. If you're older, you probably know some of those lines or recognize some of those as the beginning of a show called The TwiLight Zone. And The TwiLight Zone was this show about mysteries and mysterious things and sometimes scary things. And flow is that type of, it could be a description like that because it's kind of a mystery. So flow is a psychological term, and it identifies a state of mind, an energized focus, something where you're in full engagement and you lose this sense of time. So fulfilling vocation has flow. So for example, Warren Buffett is one of the most wealthiest men in the world, and people in the world, and wealthiest person in the world. And he was born in 1930. The guy still works. Retirement is not in his vocabulary. He doesn't understand what that means. And the reason is, one of the reasons is, and I've never heard a formal quote by Warren Buffett saying that I'm in the flow. But this guy goes to work and he has flow. He enjoys what he's doing. He loses a sense of time. He has purpose. He finds meaning in his work. So that happens. Teens can get wrapped up in video games with flow. They're just captivated and they're engaged with that. Now that can be detrimental if it's taken to extremes. So there has to be limitations on that because this flow kind of generates some dopamine in our system, and it's kind of like a drug in the sense that we really enjoy being in that state of flow. So for example, an artist stirs the imagination of their audience through sight and sound. That audience gets in flow with that artist if they're engaged in what they're doing, they're performing, whether it's music or art or the theater. So there's a book out there called The Rise of Superman, and it's by an author named Steven Kotler, and he talks about the ultimate performance. That flow is kind of the best performance. It's the optimal experience and the best performance, but this Rise of Superman causes such flow, intense flow. It has to be, these people that do these extreme sports have to be in flow or it's death. They surf these huge waves, these 100-foot waves. They're jumping off of cliffs. They're flying close to cliffs with some of those winged parachute things. I don't know, they're not parachute things. They're actually winged outfit that they put on, and they go close to the cliffs. I thought it was because of updrafts. Nope. They just go close because it's a rush. It's flow for them. A guy jumps out of an airplane at 10,000 feet and he lands without a parachute in this net. And so that's called the ultimate performance, or death it happens. So for example, flow is common in instances like that. It has to occur in that, but it's also elusive in the sense that falling in love is kind of an example of the easiest type of flow, or the video game example with the teenagers, where it kind of just happens. And when a couple is in flow, they lose sense of all time. They talk, and that person can do nothing wrong. And there's this kind of flow, and you might call that infatuation, but I think flow overlaps into that. So the challenge is, how do you get this flow to be consistent? How can you reproduce it? And the guys that do these, and the gals that do these ultimate performance feats in this book that Steven Kotler wrote, they have to get flow or they die. And so that kind of channels you into getting that channel of flow. And so there's different parts and phases of life that flow comes. So for example, without trying, it was that falling in love, the video games. People get excited about their work, but only about 30% of people get into flow with work, maybe not that many even. 70% don't. That's evident. So how do you reproduce this flow? It's kind of, there are ways to create an environment that generates flow, but there are no guarantees. So for example, divorce would be a loss of flow. And when couples don't work at getting that flow between them, there's a breakdown and they no longer have that relationship that they had before. So understanding flow, you might as well go to the originator of the concept, and that would be Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. And if you can pronounce his name, you've got some flow. So it took me a while to learn how to pronounce his name. But believe it or not, he was from a village in Transylvania. That sounds mystery. That sounds something like from the TwiLight Zone, but it's true. So he wrote this book called Flow, The Psychology of Optimal Experience. And he identifies 8 parts of flow, which I'm going to put into 4 categories. So each category has 2 parts. So the first category, what I'll label as clarity. And the author, Mihaly, breaks this down into that rules and goals are clear. So all games have rules. The outcome is to win. There's boundaries. There's the rules. There's referees enforcing the rules. And so why don't we have our lives divided into rules that are clear and bring clarity to our life? Because it takes focused effort and time to do that. And most of us, a lot of the time, don't want to do that. We don't want to sit back and do that. But when that happens, when that's all in place, then the game is kind of second nature. And that's what flow needs. All the rules need to be defined. I need to know what they are. But I'm not thinking about the rules. And I have boundaries, and I'm focused. So they're clear. My feedback is immediate. That's the second part. And so when I get immediate feedback, that would be in the form of first downs, quizzes on the way to getting my grade in my class, a smile from a person that gives me some feedback that, yeah, they either like me or they don't like me. Bigger goals are harder. You have to create your own feedback. So if I'm a sculptor, I don't just go to some big block of granite and start chopping away. I have to create a clay model first. It might be smaller, and then I go from there. So the second category I would call attention. And so the part of the attention would be the right level of challenge. You got to set this skill level. They can't be overwhelming, but it can't be boring. So there has to be a little bit of tension there, kind of a little danger, a little risk involved in that. The next one would be focused energy. You can have a great challenge range between boredom and overwhelm, and if you don't have the energy or the passion to do it, it's not going to happen for you. So to complete the project, win the game, to benefit humanity, that's your driving force. That's that focused energy that you need. The third category would be a reality check. You got to eliminate distractions, remove distractions. We are in history, we probably have more distractions than we've ever had in the history of mankind. We probably have more distractions in 1 year than people had in their lifetime prior to this electronic age. So eliminate the distractions. Unfortunately, there are some places in the wilderness that are actually loud because they're free of distractions and noise. Homes have constant noise. So we've got to eliminate the distractions. Control. Mario Andretti was a famous race car driver, and he had a quote that says, if everything's under control, you're just not going fast enough. So yes, you got to have some control of that race car, but there's a danger involved, and it's going fast. It's going over 200 miles an hour, and there's risk, but you've got to push the envelope to win. That's what has to happen. So there has to be a degree of control, but not total control. And the fourth category would be transformation. These gets into the TwiLight Zone 5th dimension phase where you just lose this sense of self-consciousness. I don't even realize totally, I'm not thinking about what's going on. It's just kind of happening. I've had that happen on the keyboard sometimes where I'm typing and I'll be typing a long section and all of a sudden my fingers will just start moving really fast, probably 3 times as fast as I normally type. I go, well, I can't believe that would come out accurately, but it does. And so that's kind of a flow. It's a spurt of flow for me. And the final part of the categories that Mihaly had set up, and the final part of that would be time transcendence. I lose all sense of time. That's that young couple or that any couple losing sense of time because they're just so engaged in an intimate conversation and there's flow between them. Sylvester Stallone wrote the movie Rocky, in just 2.5 days. That whole script, he wrote that script in 2.5 days because he finally, everything just became clear to him what he wanted to communicate through that script. So in conclusion, summarizing all this information, flow is kind of like the fifth dimension, the Twilight Zone, and it's still a mystery. You can meet all the conditions of Mihaly and Csikszentmihalyi and this Stephen Kotler, and you still may not achieve flow. It's not some simple checklist that you go down. There's some items that you can set up and try to make it work, and it can be practiced and mastered. As a matter of fact, the elite athletes have flow mastered. That's why these runners can go so far. They just get in this zone, they get in flow, and they can overcome great pain and adversity because they're in flow. So you would think that flow is rewarding enough, it gives enough incentive so that everybody would want to try to achieve this. But it's not that simple. Mihaly, he put down 8 things that were required for flow. This Stephen Kotler, he lists 17 triggers that help bring about flow. So the fact is, achieving flow is complicated and hard, especially in categories that you're really not that familiar with. So flow can't just happen randomly, like teens playing video games and falling in love, but it's unlikely that that will be repeated without some kind of effort. Any good marriage, and a couple that's been married for 50 years and they're still in flow, they will tell you they've worked hard at keeping that relationship. And they probably, if you go down those checklists, they're probably in those categories. So those that have flow and are able to master it and practice it, they have a deep sense of purpose and meaning. So the final conclusion would be, know that the way to go is with the flow. So tell me, what areas of your life do you have flow in, or have you experienced it in? Do you get it regularly? Have you had it just piecemeal, or have you mastered it? Leave some comments. If this video is helpful to you, pass it on to others, share it on Facebook, on any kind of social media, tweet it, that kind of stuff, and get this message out, because I think this is a concept that can help a lot of people. So this is Dr. Dan. Know where you're going with your life. Become the person you were destined to be, and make a difference in the world. We can be flourishing and not be happy. There's a difference there. Happy means I've got to have this great feeling. Flourishing doesn't depend and rest on feelings. It rests on a peace of mind, a knowing that I'm going to look at the positive aspect. I have flow, I have skills, I've accomplished certain things, and I can move forward in that.